Welcome to We Can Talk About This, conversations with Jonathan and Krista Threlfall about ideas shaping us and the world we live in. And today we are going to be talking about Jonathan Haidt's book, came out in March of this year, The Anxious Generation. And we're going to be talking about his central argument, a little overview of some of the things that he says, and then Krista, I'm going to ask you some questions about this.
Fantastic.
You've not engaged with this material like I have.
No, I have not.
And so this is new to you.
Yeah.
Except
I'm learning right along with you.
Except for the fact we talked about a few of the things before
Yes.
we started recording. So Jonathan Haidt, if you're unfamiliar, is a social psychologist, and he's written a few books before you might be familiar with. He's written The Happiness Hypothesis, The Righteous Mind, and The Coddling of the American Mind. This book, The Anxious Generation, he's trying to answer the question, what happened to people who were born in 1995 and beyond? Why is there an uptick in mental health issues for those younger people? And what he's doing throughout the book, he's essentially drawing a correlation. Well, he's noting the correlation between the rise of the use of smartphones and social media and the mental health issues, particularly anxiety. And he's trying to say there's not just a correlation, but there's a causation here. And so really interesting. He talks about the fact that this is the generation that hit puberty. The older members of this generational cohort hit puberty around the time when the iPhone came out. Videos started going viral. The whole idea of virality emerged during this time. The phenomenon of selfies emerged during this time as these people were going through puberty, and I think a couple other things. In terms of just like technology phenomenon that were happening right around the time when their brains are developing in really important ways. So I want to just highlight some of the things that he says, and then get your feedback on it if you have things that you want to say to make into it. Well, one thing I thought was interesting, I didn't share this with you earlier, but he said when it came to this devices that children can interact with, he said parents discovered this truth early, that is that kids could really pick up on how to use these devices.
Sometimes better than parents.
Yes, as I did in 2008, which is the year we were married, when my 2-year-old son mastered the touch and swipe interface of my first iPhone. Many parents were relieved to find that a smartphone or tablet could keep a child happily engaged and quiet for hours. All right, let's stop right there. Keeping a child happily engaged and quiet for hours using an iPhone, good or bad? What do you think?
I'm not gonna lay my carcass on the line for that.
We can talk about this.
I
lay my carcass on the line. That's a good expression.
Thank you. Because I think there are so many. I'm not just gonna paint it with a bad brush or a good brush.
I think that's wise. I respect you more for that now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I was just talking with a fellow mom about this last week because I think a question that can be helpful to ask. Okay, you're keeping a child engaged happily for hours.
Yeah.
But at what cost? And sometimes I think it's possible to keep a child happily engaged. And so for you as the parent, you're reaping the benefits now. But both the parent and child are going to reap horrible fruit from that later.
Yeah. So you're not going to say categorically that's a wrong way to keep your child entertained or engaged, but you should consider what consequences might come about as a result of my using this as a child engagement technique, right?
Yeah, and that goes for any part of parenting or life, is just because it's good now and it seems good now doesn't mean it is good. Like just because you're reaping something good from it now, like I can make my kids really, really happily engaged by saying you can eat anything in the house. They're gonna love that, and I might love that too for like the time that it buys me from not having to cook for them. Yeah. But what's the fruit from that?
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I think it correlates to something that he says later on in this book, or actually in this chapter, where he's talking about I don't want to get the anatomy. I can't even figure out anatomy.
It's tricky though because it's anatomical.
That's right, anatomical. So I was going to say,
Anatomy,
I
yeah.
was going to say the prefrontal cortex. I guess there's something in the prefrontal cortex that develops our ability to delay gratification.
Mm.
So, and apparently that doesn't develop fully in humans until they're in their 20s or so. And so when you have a child or a teenager, it's hard. I mean, assuming the sciences on that is right, it's hard for them to learn this idea of it might feel great right now. It might be like socially gratifying or like visually stimulating right now, but it might not be good. Whereas I think adults can navigate that a little better, although maybe not much better. But
I think a lot of that has to do with training. I know some children who are better than that than adults. You know,
yeah,
and
right.
children can learn delayed gratification just in small things.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but it does take work on the part of the parent.
So you're not going to condemn categorically a parent that gives a child a device,
No.
but you're going to say be careful, right?
Yeah, and I think there are sometimes children with special needs. Sometimes there are circumstances
Right.
where that is a way that they can learn that
Yeah.
they, but I think even in every circumstance, you do need to be careful about like what am I growing here? What
Yeah.
sort of fruit am I
Yeah.
working to produce?
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. There's another statement I wanted to bounce off you as well, and that is this. They're talking about social media. He's talking about social media companies, and he's talking about these companies that strive to maximize quote engagement by using psychological tricks to keep young people clicking. They hooked children during vulnerable developmental stages while their brains were rapidly rewiring in response to incoming stimulation. This included, and here's the difference between how it affects guys and girls. This included social media companies, which inflicted their greatest damage on girls, and video game companies and pornography sites, which sank their hooks deepest into boys. I think there's some insight there, right? About the way that these ways of engaging with social media can affect guys and girls differently.
Yeah. It's very sobering.
Yeah, it is very sobering. So his primary argument in the book is that he says, my central claim in the book is that these two trends, and the two trends he's referring to is are overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world. So by overprotection in the real world, he means parents saying, oh, don't go outside or don't be apart from adult supervision. And yet they enter the virtual world and there's an absence of supervision. And so you have this weird imbalance of like hover helicopter parenting in when it comes to like real embodied physical engagement. And then you get into this world in which there is not embodied physical engagement and there's no protection. There's no very few parameters. He says, my central claim in the book is that these two trends, overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world, are the major reasons why children born after 1995 became the anxious generation. So he takes the book to try to make that claim. What was your childhood like in terms of outside time play? Because he talks a lot about like unsupervised play.
Oh yeah, I had so much of it.
So we were children of the 80s and 90s.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And my first cell phone was when I I graduated high school and I shared it with my older sister.
And it was not a smartphone. It was a flip phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course not. Had they even invented
smartphones? No, they haven't invented smartphones.
Yeah.
No.
No, we're old. We are old. And I know some of you listening might be like, no, you're not old, but age is relative. And to some people, we are very, very old.
Especially when we're talking about the development of technology,
100%.
Which changes so fast and becomes so much outdated.
I remember when you got Facebook, we were dating.
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, you should get Facebook. And so I did, mainly because you were like,
really? I forgot
you told me I should get Facebook. And we were dating and I liked you. And
that was probably 2007.
Not liked in past tense.
You still like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny because even looking back at it, the memories on Facebook.
Oh my. It was a different animal back then.
Memories from like 18 years ago of my statuses, like, and it always gave this prompt, like, what are you, or
Krista is blank, blank, blank. And you're supposed to fill in the blank, like feeling happy or eating a tomato or something like that.
I had things like vacuuming right now.
and we look, those memories come up and it looks so stupid from this perspective, but that's what Facebook was then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't as nasty. It wasn't as like fighty. There weren't as many things that It's really changed a lot
Yeah.
since then.
Talk about the Mars thing. I mean, if
Well,
you don't mind.
it can remind me. I
Okay,
wanted to talk about my first phone too because I
okay.
bought my first phone to talk with you.
Mm,
That's why I bought my first cell
thank you.
phone. And it, of course, it was a flip phone, and I don't even know if it had any games on it. It was just like this little screen that you could see the number that you were
Was
calling.
that during the summer?
It was during the
Oh,
summer.
yeah.
Yeah,
Before we broke up.
before we broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry about that purchase.
it's no, it was good. It was
It
good.
turned out
It turned
for the
out for the
best.
best. Yes, it did. Um, okay, so early on at the beginning of the book, Jonathan Haidt compares kids' use of social media with, and I'm kind of compressing this real big, really intensely. Um, giving someone, some big visionary executive, permission to send your 14-year-old girl or adolescent girl to Mars, and he's saying, we're developing these colonies on Mars, and there's a lot of things that we haven't really explored. We don't really know what long-term effect this is going to have on her, but we really want you to be able to authorize her to take this trip. And he's saying, like, who would do that? But we do a similar thing when we give our kids a smartphone and they have access to this virtual world, and we're still just learning the long-term effects of this world. And so I think um, it's a helpful comparison that he opens the book with. Um, so the I also want to talk about his what he mentions about this unsupervised play. He talks about the importance of playing. I remember as a kid, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I remember just walking down the street and around and to our neighbor's house and playing with a friend. I remember it was great. And that was probably in the early 90s or so. Um, you asked me a question. Oh no, that was the Mars thing. Yeah. So he's talking about the real world. He says, I'm referring to relationships in the real world and social interactions that characterized by four features that have been typical. They are embodied, synchronous, one to one or one to several communication, and they have a high bar for entry and exit. I want to talk about that idea of having a high bar for entry and exit because he contrasts that with the virtual world.
What is he saying has a high bar?
He says he talks about the real world and he's encouraging engagement. He's contrasting the overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world. And in the real world, he's saying social interactions have a high bar for entry and for exit.
What does that mean?
In other words, to socialize with people, typically in the real world, you're in a family. Well, it's hard to get into a family, and it's hard to get out of a family.
Okay.
They're really
I was thinking like conversations. That's not what he's talking
Well,
about.
that could include conversations. Like, let's say you're at a social event. It's a party that you've been invited to. There was a relatively high bar relative to virtual world to get into that party, to actually be invited to it, to travel there, to be part of it. And you're not just gonna like walk out the second you feel uncomfortable.
Well,
I mean, I guess you could, right? But in contrast with the virtual world, he says the social interactions take place within communities that have a low bar for entry and exit, so people can block others or just quit when they're not pleased. Communities tend to be short-lived, and relationships are often disposable. So I'm thinking about the way that this is impacting our ability to socialize with people, even our level of commitment within a local church. Okay, so I think, and I'm speculating here, that it would be easy to transfer this, blocking or clicking in or out in the virtual world into a church world or a network of friends, which is like, I feel uncomfortable with this. I just kind of want to escape.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I could see how that would have some harmful effects. Okay, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about too was his advice for the use of phones, because I think this is really where people got upset with him. And I was reading some of the book reviews on this, and there's some people that were really, really mad about this.
Polarizing.
So, yes. People are saying that he is confusing correlation with causation, that he can correlate the rising use of mobile phones and social media with increased levels of anxiety and depression, but he can't prove the causation between them. And at least that's what the critics are saying about this work.
Yeah, which I just feel like why do you care so much? Like, if there is a correlation, why do you even want to risk that? Like, for
Right.
your children?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know their angle either,
Yeah.
or what they have, what dog they have in the fight. Here are these rules, or he called them suggestions. He says the suggestions I offer are based on the research I present in the book. Since the research findings are complicated and some of them are contested among researchers, I will surely be wrong on some points. I'll do my best to correct any errors by uploading the online supplement for the book, which, by the way, you could find a lot of the data that his research data for these chapters all online. So he has like massive cache on Google Docs with links and explanations and appendices and graphs and all that kind of thing. He says, nevertheless, there are 4 reforms that are so important and in which I have such a high degree of confidence that I'm going to call them foundational. They would provide a foundation for healthier childhood in the digital age.
All right.
Here they are. 1, no smartphones before high school. Parents should delay children's entry into round-the-clock internet access by giving only basic phones with limited apps, and no internet browser before 9th grade, roughly age 14. What do you think about that? No smartphones before high school, just basic phone.
Well, we happen to have a 14-year-old who does not even have a basic phone at this point. So that's what I think about it. No, even as we talked about talking about this, I'm like, we haven't even entered into the phone thing of parenting. So don't ask us what we're going to do about that, because we don't know yet. But at some point we will need and want to do that when she starts driving, right? So there's going to be a point where we do, but for now, we feel strongly enough about it that none of our kids have phones.
And have they asked for phones?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Our oldest has.
She has?
Yeah.
Did she ask specifically for a smartphone or just any kind of phone?
I mean, I think phone implies smartphone at this point, you know?
Of course.
So, I mean, though there are basic phones, but to have a phone, it's like a phone like we have.
Yeah. I personally really like the idea of the basic phone, like a phone that makes calls, and I would say also sends text messages.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
do you don't email on your phone?
I try not to. I don't.
Yeah.
I guess I do sometimes.
I use mine for email.
Yeah.
A lot.
Okay. It depends on how long the email is.
Yeah.
If it's going to turn into some short essay, I switch my laptop.
Yeah.
So no smartphones before high school. Here's his second foundation. He calls them foundations. No social media before 16. Let kids get through the most vulnerable period of brain development before connecting them to a fire hose of social comparison and algorithmically chosen influencers. Did I say that word right? Algorithmically? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Here's something I would like to say about that.
Yeah.
One thing that I do with our kids is they see me on social media.
They see you.
They see me doing
posting stuff on social media.
Or not necessarily, I mean, posting things, but like they'll be sitting with me while I'm doing things on social media.
Yeah, right.
A couple things with that. Like, they'll see things that people post that they're like, what? Oh, ew. Oh. Like, and so I think that helps them, even without me giving any commentary. They have their own ways of processing things.
Right.
Why would they put that out there?
Yeah.
Why would they say that? What? Oh, they also will see comments that people make on things that Jonathan and I do. Sometimes really, really kind and generous things, and sometimes not so much. And so I think that's a really good learning opportunity for them at their, 7 through 14.
Right.
Another thing that I think is really helpful that I'm so glad they see, sometimes I have screen time set up on my Instagram app, and sometimes I'll be showing them some funny reels, or like Jonathan and I send each other funny reels all the time. So I'll be like showing them something I sent to Dad, and suddenly my screen time limit will pop up, and I'll be like, "Oh, sorry guys, screen time. Like I can't do this until tomorrow."
Yeah.
And I think that's actually really healthy.
That's good. Yeah.
I think that's helping them. So obviously our kids don't have social media, but I think that's a way that we are teaching them just in the way that we use social media, in the way that we set up boundaries for ourselves.
Yeah.
So in that, it's not like, oh, well, once you're a mom or a dad, you can just spend as much time as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, yeah, I guess you can in one sense, but
Yeah.
also for us as parents, like we're setting up boundaries for
Right. Yeah.
ourselves.
And it shows that you need to exercise self-discipline
Yeah.
in an area that could potentially get out of control. And
Yeah.
they recognize that too.
Mhm.
And that's healthy for them to see. Yeah, that's good. So Jonathan Haidt's second foundational rule, or whatever he calls them, are no social media before 16. What about after 16? What would you say? I know we're
Not
not
there
there yet.
yet.
We're not there yet. Okay, take it one day at a time.
But did you have something you wanted to say on that? I'm not going to comment on that.
I guess it just depends.
I do think sorry, I just said I'm not going to comment. Now I'm going to say something.
Go ahead.
But I do think there is some wisdom in allowing your child to have social media while they're still in your home.
Mm-hmm. So that you can help guide them through it.
Yeah. I mean, if you give them a phone, that's your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a parent, and I don't think that's a like an invasion of their privacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good parenting.
Right. I agree.
And just helping them through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the number 16, and maybe there is some research behind that number, but that to me seems a little arbitrary. Okay, why 16? What's a magic?
I think he
about
has
that
a lot of
number?
research behind that though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that, I would say that just because you turn 16 doesn't mean that you're mature enough to handle that.
Agreed.
And I know many adults that aren't mature enough to handle that, and I think that both you and I would say at times we're not mature enough to handle that because we see things on social media like that cause us to compare ourselves with others. And so no social media before age 16. Number 3, this is mostly for schools. Phone-free schools. In all schools from elementary through high school, students should store their phones, smartwatches, and any other personal devices that can send or receive texts in phone lockers or locked pouches during the school day. That is the only way to free up their attention for each other and for their teachers.
Mm-hmm. Which our school does that.
Our school does that. I agree 100% with that. You cannot expect good attention if people are glued to their phones. It's so much more interesting than anything else going on in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the final one is far more unsupervised play and childhood independence.
Here, here.
You feel strongly about that?
I did feel strongly about that.
But
I read a book several years ago, written by a brain surgeon, and he talked about the things that he allows his children to do, and like the strict rules he has for like always wearing a helmet, always doing these things, and also things that he allows his kids to do that other parents are shocked that like they had like some huge rock boulder wall in their backyard that he let his kids play, and they were shocked he would when he worked in the hospital, but he felt so strongly that things like that are essential for brain development. Letting your child be bored and come up with things.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah.
It's brain development.
Yeah.
It's development in so many ways.
It really is. Where I wrestle with that is when our boys are so high up in a tree.
Well,
I'm trying to discover
we do set limits.
At what elevation should I say no farther?
I know.
But the fact that they want to climb trees, I love it, and I want there to be trees for them to climb in. And I mean, currently, I'm looking at right now, and I'm seeing all these sticks they have leaning up against a particular tree, and it looks like a teepee from here, but it's just something they're doing. They're just
and the thing that they do is walk up.
They walk up
sticks.
Yeah, it's
to
almost
a high
like,
elevation.
It's almost like a ramp that they're building up to the tree to get higher up in it.
Yeah, I would like to take this moment to say we have not gone to the emergency room yet.
No.
But
it could
I'm
happen.
sure that day is probably coming.
It could happen.
No broken bones yet either.
No broken bones, no stitches, right? From a cut. No, we have had some stitches from cuts, but
we have.
Yeah. A leap across a bedroom, hitting a bunk bed with the head. Yeah.
That was just glue.
Just glue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no stitches.
No stitches on that. But yeah, unsupervised play. Yeah. One thing that I love, and I know you love this too, is to see our kids just browsing around in creation. And almost as if it's this magnificent library and they're checking out leaves and bugs and turning over rocks and finding worms and
Yeah.
trying to build things. And it is, that is so important to not be constant, your attention be constantly snatched from screen to screen, from video to video to video,
Hmm.
but to be able to like engage with creation
The
in a
real
way that,
world.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that something he says after this, I just really stood out to me, because we are, I don't know, on the cusp, or we have already reached the cusp of artificial intelligence through ChatGPT and now immersive technologies, that you can wear these goggles and they
Mm-hmm.
just give you this immersive experience. And he says, given that AI and spatial computing, such as Apple's new Vision Pro goggles, are about to make the virtual world far more immersive and addictive, we better start today.
Yeah.
So he's saying, as these foundational rules that he gives are going to be even more urgent, given that now we're coming up with ways to exponentially increase the
Mm-hmm.
addictive power of
Mm-hmm.
technology. I think that's huge. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we were in Target the other day and we saw this. I forget whether it was Apple or what I think it might have been Meta. I don't know what it was, but it was this, these wraparound goggles, and you put this thing on and you're in a different world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was awesome, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was just incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm putting this on, I'm thinking, oh my, this is very dangerous. Like, this is really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say dangerous. I would say there are incredible potential benefits of it.
Powerful.
Powerful. I
Powerful
think
is a good
powerful is the
word.
word. As with any technology, me. I in my theological anthropology, that I firmly believe that the Bible's teaching on the fact that we're created in God's image and yet have fallen into sin means that we are capable of amazing technological advancements that also have the potential to do some amazing harm too.
Mm-hmm.
So we live within the tension
Yeah.
of creating things that are good and beautiful and powerful. They're beautiful and powerful. That could do either bad or good
Mm-hmm.
for our minds, for ourselves, to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, given what's going on and with artificial intelligence and spatial computing, yeah, these are good rules that he offers.
Yeah. A couple things came to
Yeah.
mind. One is that when our kids are outside, like exploring, doing things outside, we are out there with them
Mm-hmm.
doing things as well. But another thing too, just for parents listening to this is not always like this is something that we often enforce. Like, no, everybody outside. No, you have to be outside.
Enforced with objections too, with
Yeah,
some
it's not
pushback.
like our kids are like, yay, and springing outside,
Yeah.
like just leaping over rocks for
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's like, do I have to? Oh, it's so buggy. It's so, like,
Yeah. It's cold or it's
yeah.
hot.
And but we will do that, and we have room here to do that. But
Mhm.
often we'll go places
Yeah.
too, and sometimes I like that even more because there's not as many objections to go inside because in
you
order to
don't
go
have an inside
inside,
to go to.
you have to drive home. So that's something. But where Jonathan and I are doing that with them, like summer is coming up, like
Mm-hmm.
there will be enforced time outside
Mm-hmm.
for my kids every day, like, and I will be out there with them too, and just being active, trying to cultivate an enjoyment of God's creation.
Yes.
And that is something that kind of like a lot of other things we want to train our children to do, like with healthy eating or reading God's word, other disciplines that we want them to grow to love
Mm-hmm.
in the future. But if we were to give them the option, like, do you want to play this video game on this computer game, or do you want to go outside? Of course, they're always going to pick the the game.
Yeah.
So that's just something for parents, like, consider not just what is happening now, but where is that leading in the future.
That's right. Yeah. What habits are you developing?
Yeah.
I'll say something that you've done a really good job with is encouraging our kids to learn to love to read.
Mm.
And they love that. And I think that's one thing that you was early on was a big priority with you, to read to them, to teach them a love for books. And they do that still.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be surprised if at times, given the choice between technology or a book, often they would choose the book.
Mm-hmm.
Just probably because they don't have access to it very often, so there's not much. It's not like they know everything that the device can do. But I think that's also a really strong point. A love for reading, and with reading, you're having to engage with something in a way that is much harder. It takes more work than just scrolling through some sort of feed or looking at videos and that sort of thing. So hopefully this discussion has been helpful for you as we've talked about some of these concepts from Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. And hopefully it could also point you to the wisdom that we find in God's Word for parents and how we are to shepherd and nurture our children. I think of the verse from Proverbs 4:23, where a father speaks to his son and says, "My son, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the well springs of life." And anything that has the potential to shape our heart's affections is something that parents should guard diligently and be very careful of.
Yes.
And so that's one reason why how we teach our children to engage with social media and their technology remains very important for Christian parents.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. You can check out wecantalkaboutthispodcast.com for more resources and links to this book and others that will help you as you try to train your children with the use of technology.